There are moments on the path of life when everything you have suffered, everything you have learned, and everything you have managed to integrate reaches a single point of convergence. These are not ordinary moments. They are thresholds, inner crossings, where the person you have been dissolves so that the person you are meant to become can finally emerge. Carl Jung understood these turning points as thresholds of individuation, moments in which consciousness makes a decisive leap from one stage of existence into another entirely different one. These transitions are rarely gradual. They feel more like sudden expansions of awareness, quantum jumps of the psyche, where your inner world rearranges itself in an instant. Today, we are going to explore the 7 signs that you are about to step into the best stage of your life. And it is important to understand that this stage is not defined by ease or comfort. It is defined by alignment. Alignment with your authentic self, with the deepest truth of who you really are. Jung believed that the best era of a human life is not measured by external success, applause, or the illusion of constant happiness. It is measured by authenticity, by the degree to which you inhabit your true self, instead of the expectations projected onto you by others. Many people do not enter this profound stage until after their 40s, after they have lived through enough crises to fracture the illusions of the ego and strip away the layers that once kept them disconnected from their essence. The first sign that you are entering the best stage of your life is that you begin to release your need for external validation. Something deep within your psyche shifts the moment you begin to integrate what Jung described as the ego complex, the structure that organizes your sense of identity. When this structure becomes stable from within, instead of being maintained by approval from others, a new kind of freedom appears. This freedom does not happen overnight. It is the result of years of inner work, of confronting your shadow, of questioning the beliefs and expectations you inherited without realizing it. For decades, many of us live trying to impress parents, partners, colleagues, and society. We make choices based on what others will think, on how we will be perceived, on whether we will be accepted or rejected. Jung called this living from the persona, the social mask we construct to navigate the external world. But over time, this mask becomes too heavy. It stops being a tool and becomes a prison. You know you have crossed a threshold when you can say no without guilt, when you can choose your path even if nobody else understands it, when other people's disappointment no longer collapses your spirit. If you have reached a place where your decisions are guided by an inner compass instead of the shifting expectations of the outside world, if you can tolerate being misunderstood without falling apart, if the solitude of being authentic feels better than the company you had to earn by betraying yourself, then you have entered the best stage of your life. Because now, your life belongs to you. It is no longer a performance designed for invisible audiences that never truly cared about your essence. Carl Jung lived this turning point when he separated from Freud. In that rupture, he lost prestige, allies, and the approval of the psychoanalytic community. He was harshly criticized, attacked, and dismissed. But in losing all of that, he gained his soul back. He gained the freedom to explore the symbolic world his intuition had been pointing to for years. He no longer had to conform to the intellectual framework of his mentor. That freedom, although painful and heavy, marked the beginning of the most creative, transformative, and authentic period of his entire life. The second sign appears when your relationships become either profoundly authentic or they simply fall apart. There is no longer any middle ground. No comfortable gray area where things can remain half true or half alive. As Carl Jung observed throughout his work, the process of individuation naturally polarizes our connections. Relationships that were built on unconscious needs, on unresolved wounds, on codependency or projection, begin to crumble because they cannot survive the clarity that is now emerging within you. And at the same time, those relationships that are rooted in mutual recognition, in seeing the other person as a complete individual rather than an extension of your own unmet needs, grow deeper in ways you could not have imagined before. When you enter the best stage of your life, something shifts inside you. You no longer tolerate shallow bonds. You simply don't have the energy for social games, for wearing masks, for empty conversations that drain you instead of nourishing you. All those toxic dynamics that you once endured out of fear, fear of being alone, fear of losing people, fear of not being enough, no longer have power over you. Carl Jung taught that individuation requires withdrawing your projections, seeing people as they truly are, rather than as you need them to be in order to feel safe. That awareness is liberating, but it also breaks the illusions you once held. This transformation is painful because it forces you to let go of relationships you believed were essential, relationships you thought would accompany you through life. And yet, what rises in their place is infinitely more meaningful. New connections begin to form, connections in which you can be entirely seen without having to shrink, hide, or pretend. Connections where vulnerability is not interpreted as weakness, but as a pathway, a bridge that allows genuine intimacy to unfold. In these relationships, mutual growth becomes possible because both of you are committed to your own inner truth rather than performing roles to keep the peace. If your circle of friends has become smaller, but the depth of those friendships has multiplied, if the romantic relationships you seek now look nothing like the ones you used to chase, if solitude feels more nourishing than being surrounded by people who lack authenticity, then you are stepping into the best chapter of your existence. You are not losing relationships. You are shedding layers that no longer match your inner evolution. Carl Jung himself had very few true friendships in his lifetime, but the ones he did cultivate were profoundly meaningful. They were connections with people who could journey with him into the deepest mysteries of the psyche, without requiring him to dilute his ideas or simplify his inner world to be understood. That rare quality of connection fed his soul in ways that thousands of superficial acquaintances never could. It was in those relationships where genuine dialogue, shared exploration, and real presence became possible, something far more valuable than social approval or the illusion of belonging. As you move into this new stage, you begin to realize that the relationships that remain are the ones aligned with who you are becoming. They are the ones that support your inner expansion rather than limit it. They are the ones that resonate with your truth rather than your old wounds. And even if there are fewer of them, the authenticity they hold has the power to transform your life in ways that superficial companionship never will. The third sign appears when you begin to look at your past failures, not as stains you should hide, but as essential teachers that shaped the person you are becoming. It's a shift so profundo that you can almost feel it inside your chest, like something heavy that finally loosens its grip. Instead of replaying your mistakes with shame, you start seeing them as necessary steps in a path that was always guiding you, even when you thought you were completely lost. Carl Jung developed the concept of enantiodromia, the moment when one thing transforms into its opposite. where what once appeared to be a curse slowly reveals itself as a blessing. And when you enter the best stage of your life, this inversion becomes unmistakably clear. The old pain begins to make sense in ways you could have never imagined. Every relationship that collapsed taught you with surgical precision what you did not want, making you able to finally recognize what you truly desire. Every person who walked away carved out space in your life for connections that would have never arrived if you had stayed clinging to what was already dead. Every moment of heartbreak silently trained your eyes to see truth instead of illusion. All those jobs you lost, those doors that closed so abruptly, freed you from roads that would have slowly suffocated your spirit. What once felt like ruin later reveals itself as protection. All those rejections that at the time seemed like unfair punishments were in reality shields, barriers keeping you away from situations that looked desirable on the surface but were nothing more than carefully disguised traps. Life was not taking things away from you, it was redirecting you, insisting that your soul deserved more than you were settling for. Reaching this understanding is a profound turning point. When you can look back without bitterness, when you can feel genuine gratitude even for the most painful experiences because of what they taught you, you have stepped into a level of wisdom that marks the beginning of your greatest era. You start to realize that your presence here, right now, is not accidental. Everything that happened was shaping you, molding you, preparing you in ways you weren't able to see while you were still inside the storm. Jung himself walked through humiliating failures and periods of deep confusion. His relationship with Freud, once a powerful alliance, collapsed publicly and painfully. His theories were mocked and dismissed. There were times when he believed he was losing his sanity, sinking into an inner darkness he didn't know how to navigate. And yet, in his later years, he could look back and understand that every crisis had been necessary. Each fall pushed him into deeper exploration, into territories of the psyche he never would have dared to enter if his life had remained comfortable and orderly. Without those failures, there would have been no descent into the unconscious, no confrontation with the shadow, no awakening of the symbolic world that later shaped his greatest insights. It was precisely the breaking of his old identity that opened the door to the discoveries that would define his legacy. His wisdom was not born from perfection, but from the courage to face his own ruins without running away. And the same truth applies to you. The moments that once made you feel weak are the same ones that now hold the seeds of your transformation. The things that fell apart were clearing the path for something larger than what you were able to imagine at the time. When you finally see this with clarity, not as a comforting idea, but as a lived reality, you know you are stepping into the most powerful stage of your life. Not because everything is perfect, but because now you are different. The fourth sign appears when your intuition becomes your primary inner compass, surpassing even logic itself. Carl Jung described intuition as one of the four fundamental psychological functions, alongside thinking, feeling, and sensation. He realized that the most individuated individuals, those who had achieved a deep integration of their inner world, had strengthened all four functions, yet relied especially on intuition when facing decisive crossroads in life. Intuition for Jung was not a vague instinct, but the refined perception of the unconscious, a form of inner wisdom that operates beyond rational analysis. Intuition is the voice of the self, that totality within you that sees far beyond what the conscious ego is capable of understanding. In the early stages of life, we are conditioned to dismiss this voice repeatedly. We choose the job that promises a higher salary even when something inside us whispers a warning we cannot explain. We enter relationships that look perfect on paper, even though our soul quietly screams, urging us to run in the opposite direction. We settle in places where we believe we are expected to build our lives, even while every cell in our body longs for a different horizon. We follow the rules, the expectations, the external guidance, and silence the subtle signals, trying to guide us toward authenticity. But when you enter your best stage, the period Jung described as the unfolding of the self, everything reverses. Your intuition speaks, and instead of ignoring it, you respond. You listen even when what it tells you seems to contradict logic, data, or external advice. You make decisions others label irrational, strange, risky, or naive. Yet inside you, there is a deep certainty, a sense of alignment that logic alone could never give you. Jung lived this dynamic constantly in his own life. He would decline highly profitable patients simply because his intuition warned him that the therapeutic connection would not be right. He would spend years exploring ideas that others rejected as absurd because something in him knew there was hidden gold in the depths of the irrational. If you have reached a point where you trust your inner promptings more than the loud opinions of others, if you have learned to distinguish the trembling fear of the ego from the calm and persistent whisper of the self, your entire decision-making begins to transform. You move not from anxiety or urgency, but from an inner knowing that guides your steps in ways that logic cannot predict. And if your intuitive decisions repeatedly lead you to better outcomes, even when the journey feels chaotic or full of unexpected turns, then you are no longer living from the surface of who you are. You are living from your deepest center. This is one of the unmistakable signs that you have entered the best stage of your life, because it shows that you have finally established a real connection with your inner guidance. When intuition becomes your ally, rather than a mysterious intruder, you step into a new level of existence where your choices align with your true self, and life begins to unfold with a purpose that is felt rather than explained. The fifth sign appears when you begin to feel a profound peace rising within you, even while everything around you seems to be falling apart. It doesn't mean that your life has suddenly become calm, or that challenges have disappeared from your path. It means something far more powerful. You have discovered what Carl Jung described as the ego-self axis, that inner line of connection between your everyday consciousness and the deepest center of your being. Once this connection stabilizes, no external circumstance, no matter how chaotic, can tear it apart. In earlier phases of life, peace depended entirely on outcomes. If the relationship was going well, if the job felt secure, if your health stayed steady, then you could breathe. But this peace was fragile, always conditional, always threatened by the possibility of loss or change. It required constant vigilance, an exhausting attempt to control every variable around you, just to feel safe for a moment. Jung understood this as the peace of the ego, delicate, temporary, and dependent on external factors that inevitably shift. The peace that emerges from the self is different. It does not require ideal conditions to exist. You can lose your job and still feel calm because something inside you knows there is meaning behind the loss. You can face illness and remain peaceful because you've made peace with impermanence itself. You can walk through solitude without fear, because your own presence has finally become a place where you enjoy being. This deeper peace grows from integrating enough of your shadow to trust your own strength. You know you can face whatever comes. If you've noticed that crises that would have shattered you in the past now find you grounded, if you sense a quiet stillness inside you, even while everything outside is noise and disorder, if the anxiety that once controlled your life has transformed into a profound trust in the unfolding process of existence, then you have entered the strongest stage of your evolution. This peace is not passivity, it is contained power. Carl Jung carried this inner stillness even during the World Wars, even when he was falsely accused of sympathizing with the Nazis, even while confronting his own mortality. He had touched a place within himself that was untouched by circumstances, a place that remained unmoved even when the external world was burning. And it was this inner connection, steady, unwavering, eternal, that carried him through everything. The sixth sign appears when your purpose becomes undeniable, when it stops being a distant intuition and turns into the axis around which your entire life begins to reorganize. At this stage, you are no longer driven merely by the instinct to survive or by the pressure to meet external expectations. Instead, you start living from the inner truth that has been quietly shaping itself within you for years. Carl Jung often spoke of this as the calling, that inner summons that whispers, sometimes faintly, sometimes overwhelmingly, that there is something only you came to do, something that can be expressed only through your unique way of being in the world. In the early chapters of your life, this calling is usually so subtle that it feels like background noise. You overlook it because you're too busy trying to meet the demands of everyday existence, paying bills, fulfilling responsibilities, trying to keep up with what society says you should be. But when you enter your best stage, that whisper becomes a roar you can no longer silence. It becomes louder than fear, louder than doubt, louder than the stories you once told yourself about who you needed to be. You've done enough inner work to recognize the difference between the voice of your ego and the voice of your soul, and the excuses that once held you back no longer have power over you. You begin to understand what you came here to do, and though it scares you, because real purpose always carries an element of risk, you know you must respond. Something inside you realizes that life can no longer be about simply getting through the day. It now becomes about expressing the singular essence that you carry, the one expression that cannot be replicated by anyone else. And purpose doesn't always look grand in a conventional or glamorous sense. For some people, it is raising children with consciousness, breaking generational cycles of pain, and building a new lineage of awareness. For others, purpose takes the form of art that touches hearts, a creation that awakens something sleeping in those who encounter it. And for others still, it is the quiet integrity of living so authentically that their very existence becomes a silent example of what's possible. Jung said that every person carries a personal myth, an inner story waiting to be lived out in the world. Your best stage begins the moment you stop resisting your myth and begin embodying it, even if you don't yet know where the path leads or how it will unfold. If you've reached a point where you sense clearly what direction your life wants to take, even if the map is incomplete, and even if the next steps require courage and sacrifice, then you have entered your best stage, because at this point, your life no longer revolves around merely staying alive. It is animated by a why that transcends existence. You wake up knowing that your life is no longer accidental or random. You feel a thread of coherence, tying together everything you've lived, including the moments that once felt like detours or mistakes. The seventh sign is that gratitude begins to permeate everything, even the darkest, most painful chapters of your past. Jung understood that inner wholeness requires embracing both the light and the shadow, that you cannot become complete if you reject half of your experience. By the time you reach your best stage, you have undergone enough inner alchemy to transform even the most bitter poison into medicine. The depression that almost broke you becomes the source of your ability to feel compassion for others who suffer. The betrayal that shattered your heart becomes the teacher that showed you discernment and self-worth. The loss that you thought would destroy you becomes the depth that gives meaning to everything else you now cherish. When you can look back at your entire life and not wish to change anything, not because it was easy, but because you recognize that every experience was essential, then you have reached what Jung called the opus magnum, the great work of becoming whole. This gratitude is not forced, nor is it superficial positivity. It is a profound recognition that your soul knew what it was doing when it chose this exact path, with all its twists, descents, breakthroughs, and transformations. Jung said that when you look back, everything begins to feel inevitable, as if an invisible hand had been guiding you step by step, shaping you through each event. That feeling of destiny fulfilled, of meaning revealed, is one of the clearest signs that you've entered your best stage. If you want to continue exploring Carl Jung's depth psychology and apply it to your own individuation process, subscribe to the channel, because every day we delve deeper into the ideas, tools, and inner maps that can radically transform your understanding of existence. We are building a community of souls committed to their own evolution, people who are not afraid to explore the depths of their inner world and live authentically. Your best stage doesn't mean everything will suddenly become easy or that you'll never face suffering again. It means that you've developed the ability to find meaning in everything, even in pain. It means you live from your authentic center instead of living according to the expectations or fears of others. It means your relationships are real, your purpose is clear, your peace is deep, and your gratitude is genuine. Jung reached his own best stage in his old age, after decades of confronting himself with brutal honesty. He had faced his madness, integrated his shadow, made peace with his mortality. The last years of his life were marked by deep serenity, continuous creativity, and a quiet sense of having fulfilled the mission he felt life had entrusted to him. That is what it means to reach your best stage, not the absence of challenges, but the presence of wholeness. If you recognize these 7 signs in your own life, if you feel that you have crossed an invisible threshold, if you look back and can finally see how everything was preparing you for this moment, then welcome. You have arrived. This is your best stage, not because it will be perfect, but because you have finally become truly yourself. And that authenticity is the greatest achievement any human being can reach. What you're about to hear is no coincidence. Something beyond your logic brought you here. And when you finish this video, you'll realize it all had a purpose. There are stories that don't begin with you, but somehow they end in you. Wounds you never lived through, yet you carry them. Silent loyalties to ancient pains, to patterns that echo through your family, generation after generation, like a whisper no one can silence. Then, one day, you arrive, and without fully understanding why, you begin to feel a deep urge inside you, a calling to break that cycle, not to reject your origin, but to honor it in a new way, through healing. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And there are family fates that you can no longer carry without losing yourself in the process. It's not because you are stronger, it's because you are more awake. It's not that it doesn't hurt, it hurts deeply, but your soul chose to awaken. What weighs on you now doesn't always belong to you. What aches inside you didn't necessarily start with you, but you feel it, because you are the one who has come to close the cycle. The first sign is a deep discomfort with what your family has always considered normal. It's not judgment, it's awareness. It's as if your eyes begin to see something that others continue to accept without question. The emotional silence, the constant sacrifice, the guilt passed down like an heirloom, the love that hurts but is never spoken about. And even if you can't explain it clearly, something inside you whispers, "This can't go on." You start to realize that this discomfort doesn't stem from outside criticism, but from an inner sensitivity that refuses to be numbed any longer. You've tried to adapt. You've stayed quiet. You've repeated certain gestures, phrases, behaviors, just to keep the peace. But something inside you breaks a little more every time you betray your truth in the name of loyalty to your family system. It's as though a part of you knows that continuing these patterns only delays the healing for everyone. Because what you heal doesn't just heal for you. It heals backwards for those who couldn't, and forward for those who are yet to come. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, but he also spoke of the family unconscious, that invisible field where secrets are buried, where fears, losses, and injustices remain unnamed, yet still pulse through the bloodline. And you, by noticing it, by feeling it, you're not exaggerating, you're waking up. Those who come to break cycles do not do so out of blame, but out of courage. And you, by feeling that discomfort in what once felt like normality, have already taken the first step. You are saying, "Enough," from a sacred place. You're beginning to listen to a voice that doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the soul that has decided not to repeat. You also begin to notice that this discomfort isn't shallow or fleeting. It's a deep calling, a vibration that comes alive in moments that others overlook, a phrase spoken with resignation, a scene that replays across generations, an emotion passed down as if it were part of your family name. And you, without knowing why, cannot look away. This is not about feeling superior. In fact, many times you felt like the outsider, like you didn't belong. You've tried to follow the rules of your family system. You've done what was expected, but something in you dims every time you pretend it doesn't affect you. Because you weren't born to adapt to inherited pain. You were born to transform it. And even when it hurts, maybe especially when it hurts, it's a sign that your soul chose a mission far greater than you imagined. Not to fix others, but to break the pattern from within. Not to destroy the tree, but to prune it with intention, allowing something new to grow through you. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, but who looks inside awakens." And by looking honestly at the deepest connections you have, those that shaped you, you are awakening to a truth others could not bear to face. You're beginning to see that what once looked like love was actually fear, that what passed for strength was often just unhealed hardness, that what was labeled sacrifice was actually self-abandonment, passed down again and again. But you can no longer follow that script, not because you're rebellious, but because you're conscious. And consciousness doesn't scream. It burns. It burns quietly inside you until you choose to act from it, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because you know that the pain of awakening is more honest than the comfort of repeating. And so, here you are, starting to write something new. Even if you don't yet have the words, even if the page still feels blank, even if your voice trembles, you're doing something sacred. You're beginning again, not from rejection, but from remembrance. You are the end of the wound and the beginning of the healing. The second sign is when you find yourself deeply moved by stories you never lived, narratives that somehow feel carved into your skin as if they've always belonged to you. Someone mentions a long-ago loss, a distant absence, a quiet surrender, and suddenly a wave of emotion rises within you. You can't explain where it comes from, but it feels ancient, as if your soul recognizes a pain that wasn't yours to begin with, yet you carry it as though it were. Carl Jung understood that the psyche doesn't have the sharp boundaries we imagine. It stretches beyond the self and intertwines with something much older, much deeper. When you feel what no one else has spoken, you are touching the echo of an ancestral wound that you were born to heal. You begin to realize that those feelings are not a figment of your imagination or the result of being overly sensitive. They are living memories, emotional residues embedded in your dreams, your silences, and your body. Sometimes you experience sadness without a clear cause, as if a part of you is mourning something that never happened to you personally, but deeply affected someone who came before you. That uncried grief, passed from generation to generation, has now reached you. And it's not a coincidence. What you're receiving is not just a family name, it's an energetic legacy. You didn't inherit only features or traditions or the stories people are willing to tell. You also inherited the silence, the unresolved sorrow, the emotional exile, and your soul, more awake and more present than perhaps it's ever been, has begun to make space for those suppressed truths to be expressed and finally transformed. Sometimes it's in a phrase you hear or a childhood memory that unexpectedly surfaces. There's a sting in your chest, not nostalgia, but recognition. Your body becomes a bridge between what was denied and what can now be liberated. And even if others don't understand why you're so affected, even if they think you're overreacting, deep down, you know the truth. You know you're not feeling only your own emotions. You're feeling for all those who weren't allowed to feel. Jung described the soul as a field where all the parts that have been rejected, individually and collectively, seek to express themselves. You are that part of the family system that can no longer look away. You are the awareness returning to what others have spent lifetimes avoiding. And so, yes, at times, it feels like too much. Not because you're broken, but because you are receiving so much. Because ancient emotions are echoing through your being. Emotions that can no longer be silenced. And even though it hurts, there is something in you that refuses to shut down. Because you know that this pain is the doorway to a truth that must be spoken at last. With your sensitivity, you are cleansing what no one else could put into words. And you begin to notice that this connection to what you didn't live is not merely emotional, it's vibrational. You step into certain rooms, you hear certain stories, or even just glance at an old photograph, and something awakens in you, a languageless echo, a subtle trembling in your soul, a quiet certainty that something unresolved happened there. You may not understand all the details. You might never fully grasp the entire story, but you still feel ready to carry that invisible inheritance. Not out of martyrdom, not for attention, but because you simply cannot live anesthetized. There's a part of you that refuses to ignore the frequencies that feel out of place. Many times, you've felt the weight of something that doesn't quite belong to your personal history, and yet you cannot let it go as if it means nothing. Because you know that this wasn't placed in you by mistake. It was placed in you because you were chosen to bring it to a close. And that doesn't make you a savior. It makes you a channel. The passage through which what has been stuck for generations finally begins to move. The body where emotional knots begin to loosen. The soul that reopens a door that had been locked shut through years of pain, shame, or fear. And though this task is quiet, often lonely, it is also profoundly sacred. Jung believed that the unconscious of a family always seeks to restore balance through one of its members, not to punish, but to heal, to reorder the system through awareness. And you, with your sensitivity, your discomfort, and your often misunderstood emotions, are that member. The one who comes to witness what no one else could see, to feel what generations have buried. Every time you allow an ancient emotion to rise, every time you honor a pain without repeating it, every time you break a destructive pattern without carrying guilt, you are healing, not just for yourself. You are healing backward. You are liberating forward. And even if that transformation is invisible to the world around you, it changes everything. There is a third sign, one that many overlook, but that you have carried like a quiet weight for most of your life. It's the subtle, often painful realization that you have always been the different one in your family, the one whose thoughts don't quite align, the one whose presence, even when unintentional, stirs discomfort, the one who sees what others have normalized and dares to ask, why? You've never fully felt like you belonged, not because you were disconnected, but because you were attuned to a different frequency of awareness. You operate from a higher state of consciousness, one that your family system has yet to understand, let alone support. It's not a matter of superiority, but of alignment. Carl Jung spoke about this. He understood that the individual who brings light to the family tree is often met with rejection from the very roots they are trying to heal. And yet, by staying true to your inner truth, even when it alienates you, you are honoring something far greater than mere approval. You are honoring your purpose. You also know deep within you that this feeling of not fitting in is not recent. It has been there for as long as you can remember. Since childhood, you've noticed the difference. You felt more deeply, sensed more intensely, and reacted to life in ways that others didn't understand. What was trivial to them was monumental to you. What they accepted without question, you could never digest without inquiry. And somewhere along the way, you were made to feel like that sensitivity was a flaw, like your depth was a burden, like your intensity was a problem to be fixed. You were told you were too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too complicated, and for a long time, you believed them. So you tried to conform. You trimmed parts of yourself. You molded your edges. You practiced the art of silence and suppression, all in the name of belonging. But each time you did, something inside you dimmed. Something sacred was silenced. Because that difference, The very thing you were trying to hide wasn't a mistake. It was your signal, a silent divine reminder that you did not come here to continue the same story. You came to rewrite it at its roots. And rewriting doesn't mean you're here to impose. It doesn't mean shouting to be heard or forcing change. It means existing, fully and unapologetically, without abandoning yourself. It means holding your vision steady, even when it makes others uncomfortable, even when it creates distance, even when you're met with suspicion or patronizing smiles. Because what you carry isn't just a different perspective, it's a new frequency altogether, a vibration that challenges, without trying, everything that generations before you were taught to ignore or suppress. Jung described this as the process of individuation, the courageous journey of becoming who you truly are, even if it means defying the inherited expectations of your family, your culture, your ancestry. And that's precisely the road you're on. You are walking a path not mapped out for you. You are choosing to pause where others rush, to speak where others stay silent, to act based on what you feel rather than what you're told is right. That's not rebellion, it's revelation, and that painful feeling of not fitting in. It has become your compass. It has shown you the way. You now understand it, not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that you came here not to save anyone, not to prove anything, but to remember and to remind others, through your presence, that there is another way to live, to feel, to relate. And yes, sometimes that role weighs heavily. Sometimes it isolates you, but you no longer view it as a curse. You see it as a calling. Because someone had to interrupt the cycle. Someone had to pause the narrative that was looping endlessly, and that someone is you. You've probably also noticed that the more authentic you become, the more clearly you see the dissonance around you. There are moments when simply being in the room shifts the energy. Certain conversations become strained, as if your presence alone holds up a mirror no one asked for. You're not trying to change anyone, you're just being yourself. But your vibration has changed, and it cannot be masked. You don't have to say a word. Your energy speaks for you, and it's not always welcomed with open arms. Sometimes it manifests as subtle exclusion, as unexplained distance, as awkward silences that hang heavy in the air. Not because you're wrong, but because you're bringing light to places that have been kept in shadow for generations. And light, as beautiful as it is, can be deeply unsettling at first. It disrupts, it reveals, and not everyone is ready for that. But you are no longer willing to dim your light just to make others comfortable. You've already paid the price of pretending, of staying quiet, of squeezing yourself into molds that never fit. And now, you've decided your soul will not bear that cost anymore. Because the price of belonging at the expense of yourself is far too steep. And you learnt this not through theory, but through experience, through emptiness that couldn't be filled, through inner fractures, through those nights when everything seemed fine on the outside, but something within you screamed. Jung said, healing begins the moment one chooses to carry their own destiny instead of living out the collective script. That is exactly what you're doing. You've stopped living just to keep the peace. You've started living to stay true to your essence, because you now understand that this inner fidelity doesn't only liberate you, it liberates every soul who will walk the path after you. Not fitting in no longer wounds you, it affirms you. It tells you that your path is not one of repetition, but of creation. Your energy is not here to fit the mold. It's here to gently dissolve it. Not through destruction, but through love. Not through noise, but through the silent coherence of someone who can no longer pretend to be what they are not. You are no longer hiding. You are no longer apologizing. You are simply being. And in doing so, you are transforming the world, one truth at a time. The fourth sign is when you're deeply moved by the realization that your decisions affect not only your life, but also those who came before you and those who will come after. You no longer choose from the ego, you choose from awareness, because you understand that every time you break a pattern, you're not being selfish, you're freeing an entire lineage from repetition. Carl Jung believed that individual healing is actually collective healing, and by acting from your truth, you're writing a new future for your bloodline. You've also started to feel both the weight and the honor of that responsibility, because your choices aren't just about personal comfort anymore. You're making them knowing that each conscious step untangles old knots, that every boundary you set with love marks a limit that has never existed before, that when you choose silence over shouting, truth over the mask, the soul over the role, you're opening sacred space that never existed, and even when it's hard, you do it anyway. Even if no one notices, you keep going. Because you're not doing it for applause, you do it because it feels meaningful. Something ancient within you, older than this life, knows you came to close a cycle. Not from rejection, but from elevation. Not to punish those who came before, but to free what they couldn't release when they had the chance. Carl Jung said, "One of the most powerful ways to heal the past is to live authentically in the present." And you've begun to embody that truth. You're no longer driven by the fear of breaking tradition. You're moved by the vision of what can be created when tradition is transformed with awareness. You sense that each bond, each decision, each deep conversation you dare to have isn't just personal growth. It's part of a collective memory being rewritten through you. Because change doesn't always come through grand gestures. Sometimes it comes as a firm no, as an unflinching gaze, as a presence that no longer pretends. And within that small gesture, you're making history, not because you're perfect, but because you are present. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you've stopped running. And by not running, you're holding space that was once filled with fear, silence, or cycles. That space is now filled with your awareness. You've also noticed that every time you choose differently, something realigns inside you, and also within your family's story. It's not just a personal feeling. It's as if a thread in the invisible fabric of your lineage shifts, as if by saying, "This ends with me," you set free someone long ago who never had the voice to say it. And even if it's never spoken out loud, even if no one names it, you know. Something in the entire system changes when you change with awareness. You've started to notice that your journey, no matter how personal it seems, is connected to a wider web. Your healing doesn't end with you. When you dare to break a bond based on manipulation, when you drop an imposed role, when you choose peace over automatic conflict, you're honoring those who didn't have the strength, the permission, or the freedom to do it before. Carl Jung said that what's left unresolved emotionally in one generation is passed down as fate in the next. And you, by healing what was ignored at the root, are breaking the chain, not with anger, but with awareness. Because what's not transformed is repeated, and you can no longer allow cycles that silence your soul. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You don't need to convince or justify. Your integrity speaks louder than words, And even if your path is misunderstood, you feel peace, because you know that the peace you build today will be inherited by your children or the children of life itself. Every time you choose from your soul and not from your wounds, you become a link of light, turning a painful cycle into a new beginning. And that beginning starts with you. The fifth sign. You begin to feel a deep urge to cleanse, not just your physical space, but also your relationships, your thoughts, your emotions. It's as if something within you is demanding lightness, not as an escape, but as a path to clarity. You simply can't continue carrying what was never yours, or upholding patterns that no longer reflect your truth. Carl Jung understood that what accumulates in the unconscious eventually reveals itself in the external world. And now you are starting to empty yourself so that you can inhabit your inner world from a different place. You begin to realize this impulse to cleanse is not shallow. It's not about improving your life as an external goal. It's about creating space for what your soul is finally ready to receive. You feel that there are things, people, and thoughts that no longer resonate with your current vibration. Not because they're bad, but because they no longer represent you. Not because you're running away, but because you're now choosing from a different center, one that is more loyal, more peaceful, more profound. Just like you clean your home, your wardrobe, or your routines, you also start to examine the loyalties you've been maintaining out of habit. You begin to wonder if you're carrying guilt that was never yours, if you're holding on to relationships that survive only because you fear conflict, if you're still obeying ideas that no longer align with your deepest truth. And you realize that yes, much of what weighs you down was never truly yours. Carl Jung once said that those who look inward awaken, and you've started to look with more honesty, with more calm, with less judgment. And from that place, you've begun to see clearly that the noise, the chaos, the tension, often they don't come from what you're living now, but from what you're still dragging behind. And you can't, and don't want to, keep dragging what you never chose. So you start to let go, sometimes with tenderness, other times with pain, but always with truth. You release inherited patterns, habits that disconnect you, roles that limit you, because you know you cannot step into your purpose if you're full of invisible agreements with a past that has already run its course. And each thing you cleanse, silently and consciously, is an act of love. Love for yourself. Love for those who will come after you. Love for those who came before you and couldn't do what you're now allowing yourself to do. You're emptying yourself to remember who you are, and that is a vital part of closure. You also begin to notice that every time you cleanse something external, something internal becomes lighter. It's not a coincidence. Your surroundings begin to reflect your energy. You can no longer tolerate constant noise or shallow conversations or the excuses you keep making to avoid facing what you already know doesn't align with you, because what you used to ignore has now become too obvious. And that act of cleansing is not always visible. Sometimes it's about stopping the justification of your own pain. Other times, it's saying no without guilt, or simply allowing yourself to rest without feeling the need to compensate with productivity. You're slowly dismantling the old mandates you inherited, the pressure, the self-denial, the forced silence. And in doing so, you're writing a new way of being in the world. Carl Jung spoke about integrating the unconscious, not to reject it, but to free it. And as you begin to face with compassion what you once avoided, you're integrating, not because everything is solved, but because you're no longer breaking yourself in order to hold it all together. You no longer need to be right or prove anything. You just need to feel at peace with what you're leaving behind. Each object you release, each bond you reframe, each emotion you let go without explanation. It's an act of ancestral liberation. Because cycles don't close when everything is perfectly clear. They close when you decide you no longer want to live from the wound. They close when you give yourself permission to choose from your soul, not your inheritance. And you, even if you sometimes forget it, are already choosing differently. The sixth sign appears when, even after a difficult path, something inside you still chooses to remain open. You haven't shut down, even though you've had every reason to. You haven't hardened your soul, even though the pain was real. And that is the clearest sign that you're here to close a cycle, not by repeating the emotional shutdown you inherited, but by staying open. Carl Jung understood that true transformation begins when we stop acting from the wound and start living from awareness. And you, even in the middle of exhaustion, have kept choosing to heal. You also know that staying open hasn't been a comfortable choice. It's been a brave one, because closing off would have been easier, and it would have made sense. After so many disappointments, after so many broken bonds, after giving more than you received over and over again, it would have been natural to build a shield. But you didn't. You chose to keep feeling, to keep trusting, to keep healing. And while that sometimes hurts more, it also makes you free, because your soul didn't come here to replay the script of hardening in order to survive. It came to rewrite life from a different place, from conscious openness, from vulnerability turned into strength, from the wound transformed into a bridge. You came to close a cycle, yes, but not through emotional shutdown, through sacred closure. Jung used to say, "What doesn't get transformed gets repeated." And you chose to transform, not with words, but with silent acts, choosing a different word in the middle of conflict, upholding your self-love when no one else validates it, walking away without resentment, looking back without bitterness. All of that, even if unseen, even if unnamed, is active healing. It is embodied evolution. Every time you choose to stay open, even while afraid, you are breaking the pattern. You're freeing those who had to shut down in order to survive. You're showing your lineage, without saying a word, that there's another way to walk through life. That love doesn't have to hurt. That relationships don't have to be born out of emptiness. That it is possible to live without repeating what destroys. And now, that possibility lives in you. Because you chose the hardest path, yes, but also the brightest one. The path of the soul that doesn't shut down, even when trembling. The path of the heart that, even scarred, keeps beating with presence. You've also begun to sense that your openness is no longer naivety, it's mastery. Because now, you don't open yourself to be accepted. You open because you've learned that closing your heart doesn't protect you. It just separates you from your truth. You've crossed the threshold where sensitivity stops being weakness and becomes a path. A path you now walk by choice, knowing that staying available from the soul heals something in the world. Your ability to keep loving, even when misunderstood, even when judged, even when hurt, is an ancestral force. It is the part of your lineage that came to end the cycle of constant defense, of hardness as a shield, of silence as the only response. And that is revolution. A revolution that doesn't need noise, just presence. Carl Jung understood that true transformation doesn't happen by avoiding pain, but by walking through it without losing yourself. And you've done that. You've felt deeply without giving up. You've cried without dimming your light. You've been alone, but never disconnected from who you really are. That space, that choice, is where the cycle came to its end. Not because it burned out, but because you chose another way. And that choice is what changes everything. Because when one person in a system stays open, real, and available from the soul, the entire story begins to shift. What once felt eternal begins to dissolve. What once seemed inevitable stops repeating. Because you, with every act of presence, with every conscious gesture, with every boundary set, without rage, are writing a different ending. And that ending, even if no one sees it, is sacred, because it doesn't close from fear. It closes from love. Closing ancestral cycles isn't rejecting your roots. It's giving them back the freedom they never had. It's looking back without copying, walking forward without dragging the past, and inhabiting the present from a level of awareness that isn't inherited. It's conquered, and you're conquering it. Carl Jung believed that the soul awakens when someone dares to be different, not out of rebellion, but out of truth. And that truth is now alive within you. Because even if it wasn't a mental decision, your soul said, "This ends with me." And that doesn't separate you from your lineage. It honors it. Because you're not closing this cycle to break away. You're closing it to free, to make room for something fairer, healthier, and more real. If this video stirred something deep within you, if each word echoed wounds you've carried but never named, it's because you are that point of transformation. And if you want to keep walking toward your truth, grounded in your roots but free from repeating the wound, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Here, we don't just reflect. Here, the soul recognizes itself. Here, every word exists in service of your awakening. There are moments in life when the soul crosses a threshold, an invisible point of no return, where nothing remains the same. It's not a loud or dramatic shift, but a silent, irreversible transformation that changes everything. This crossing marks the beginning of a new path, one that is rich with awareness and a profound awakening. To recognize that you've crossed that threshold is an act of courage and truth, because it means accepting that your life has changed forever. The first sign appears when you realize you can no longer live the way you used to. The old habits, beliefs, and patterns that once held you together begin to lose their meaning. As Carl Jung would say, this moment is part of the process of individuation. The moment when the soul begins to separate from the shadows of the past and emerge into its true essence. You no longer feel satisfied with superficial answers or surface-level experiences. That internal discomfort, that feeling that something is missing, is the first real indication that you've crossed the threshold. It's a deep inner calling that resonates in every fiber of your being. You start to feel disillusioned with what once gave you comfort, as if the structures that once provided safety now feel like cages. The spiritual threshold you've crossed begins to push you toward a life of deeper meaning and authenticity, even if it means walking into the unknown. This transformation isn't just mental, it's vibrational. Your energy no longer aligns with the things that used to feel normal. A space opens up within you, inviting you to let go of what no longer serves your growth and expansion. Carl Jung emphasized that separating from the shadow is essential to the birth of the true self. And although that process can be painful, it's also liberating and necessary. You begin to notice that what used to matter now holds less weight, and new values start rising from within you. Values that are more aligned with your soul's essence. It often feels like a symbolic death and rebirth. Something old must die, so that something new and more authentic can be born. Once you've crossed this irreversible threshold, every step forward becomes an opportunity to grow, to learn, to evolve. There's no turning back, because your soul has awakened to a new level of consciousness. The search for truth is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity. It becomes the compass that guides your every decision and movement. This inability to return to who you once were becomes a kind of anchor, keeping you grounded in your transformation. Each day, the old structures of identity begin to crumble, and in their place, a more authentic and aligned self begins to emerge. Yes, it's unsettling to break away from the familiar, but that's the sacred cost of attaining inner freedom. This shift penetrates not only your thoughts, but your body, your heart, and your spirit. Your body senses the change as a different vibration, a higher frequency that starts rejecting anything that no longer aligns with your evolution. Your heart begins to open to more meaningful experiences, and your spirit awakens to a wisdom that transcends logic and language. This integration is the true marker of a crossed spiritual threshold. What makes this crossing irreversible is that your soul has expanded, and that expansion cannot be undone. Processes have been activated within you that work on both conscious and unconscious levels, forever altering the way you perceive yourself and the world. Even when challenges arise, you're no longer willing to look away from the inner calling that guides your path. Your choices now reflect a deep alignment with values that were once buried or suppressed. Life begins to reveal itself with greater clarity, and although the road ahead is uncertain, there's a quiet confidence inside you that sustains each step. There's a growing certainty that this journey is not only real, it's necessary. The threshold you crossed is a portal into a fuller, more meaningful life. This awakening transforms everything, including your relationships and surroundings. What once resonated begins to fade, and in its place, new, more authentic connections emerge. Your energy changes. It becomes more refined, more radiant, and it attracts people and experiences that mirror this new version of you. The threshold is not just an internal experience. It begins to reshape your outer reality. What follows is a continuous invitation to dive deeper into self-awareness, to keep peeling away layers, and to discover the essential truth that has always lived inside you. It becomes a journey of continuous integration, where both shadow and light coexist in harmony. This balance allows your soul to shine in its full brilliance. You begin living a life where every moment is intentional, where presence is sacred, and where your connection to universal wisdom is renewed. You've crossed a point of no return, and in that surrender lies the beauty and power of your spiritual awakening. That irreversible crossing marks the beginning of a deep metamorphosis, one that reshapes every cell in your being. You no longer cling to fleeting certainties or the false securities that once defined your path. Instead, you embrace uncertainty as an open door to expansion and genuine growth. This awakening drives you to live with a new intensity, where even the most difficult experiences are seen as sacred opportunities to evolve. The awareness that comes after crossing that threshold is not static. It flows, it breathes, it constantly invites renewal. The old wounds become quiet teachers. The shadows you once feared now add a depth you never knew you were capable of. Carl Jung reminds us that individuation is a never-ending journey, a constant movement toward wholeness and authenticity. This irreversible transformation also connects you to broader dimensions of existence. You begin to sense a resonance with universal energies, a deep intuitive understanding that your life is part of something much greater than yourself. This connection strengthens your sense of purpose. It influences your decisions in a way that reflects the purest truth of your soul. In this new state, patience and self-compassion become essential. You understand that your journey is deeply personal and that every step, no matter how unsure or lonely it may feel, is valuable. Trust in the process sustains you. You know the threshold was never a barrier. It was a doorway to a more conscious life. Yes, this point of no return is, in fact, a new beginning. A beginning where authenticity, inner wisdom, and light unite to guide every movement, every thought, every breath. You've entered a sacred space where transformation is no longer optional. It's inevitable. And in that inevitability lies your true freedom. The second sign is when you begin to feel a much deeper connection with your intuition, and with it, a growing clarity in the decisions you make. It's not that the external world has become less chaotic, but rather, your inner world has begun to radiate a wisdom that surpasses confusion. You no longer doubt yourself as much as you once did, because a quiet, unwavering voice within you starts to guide your choices with conviction, like the echo of an ancient truth rising from the core of your being. Carl Jung understood this as a crucial part of the individuation process, that sacred journey toward becoming your true, whole self. It's when the unconscious begins to reveal its wisdom in your waking life, gently pointing you toward alignment and meaning. You feel this guidance not in grand revelations, but in the subtleties, in the calm certainty that washes over you before making a difficult decision, in the way your body relaxes when you choose what feels right, even if it defies logic. This is a sign that you've crossed a spiritual threshold and that your life is beginning to align more deeply with your essence and your higher purpose. The clarity you now experience within is not a random occurrence. It is the product of a profound awakening that bridges your conscious mind with the rich, intuitive depths of your unconscious. This inner voice, though quiet and often subtle, acts as a beacon. It shines through the fog of uncertainty and lights up the path that's meant for you. You no longer get lost in mental spirals or paralyzed by fear. Instead, you move forward with a grounded confidence that only comes from being in tune with your true self. This intuitive awakening enables you to notice signs and synchronicities that previously went unnoticed. Those moments when the universe seems to whisper, "You're on the right track." Life begins to speak to you in a clearer, more direct language, and you, in turn, learn to listen, not with your intellect, but with your heart wide open. You start trusting that each step you take is guided by a higher intelligence that sees farther than you can. Carl Jung described this as the emergence of archetypal wisdom, the timeless knowledge stored within the collective unconscious. This wisdom becomes accessible to those who dare to listen, to those who are willing to pause and truly connect with what lies beneath the surface. The trust that arises from this connection also begins to transform the way you face challenges and make decisions. You stop chasing answers in the outside world or relying solely on cold logic. Instead, you begin to act from a space of internal certainty and intuitive alignment. This inner shift elevates your frequency and propels you forward toward the destiny your soul came here to fulfill. In this process, intuition becomes your steady and loyal companion. It becomes a compass that guides you through the storms, a reminder of who you truly are, even when everything around you feels uncertain. The clarity that emerges from this signal is not just comforting. It's a confirmation that the spiritual threshold you've crossed is real and that it's leading you toward higher levels of consciousness and personal fulfillment. This awakening of intuition doesn't just change how you perceive the world. It also redefines your relationship with yourself and with life itself. You begin to feel a deeper connection forming between your mind, your heart, and your soul. These aspects of yourself, once fragmented or at odds, now move together in a harmonious flow that guides every decision and every action with a clarity that once seemed out of reach. That inner voice you now hear more frequently and trust more fully becomes a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between your conscious awareness and the vast landscape of your unconscious mind. Jung referred to this bridge as the meeting with archetypes, those universal energies that offer wisdom, strength, and guidance to your personal journey. They are not abstract ideas. They are living symbols that awaken within you, offering direction and resonance as you navigate your path. As you open yourself to this inner flow, you begin to receive messages that don't just inform you, they inspire and empower you. This renewed intuition shields you from paths that are not aligned with your truth, and it gently steers you toward those that nourish your spirit. This inner guidance is a clear manifestation that the threshold you crossed is deep and transformative, and that you are now moving toward a life where your inner and outer worlds are increasingly in harmony. In this state of being, your self-trust grows naturally, and with it, your ability to live with authenticity and full presence. You no longer seek validation from others to confirm your choices. You stand in the knowing that each step is part of a larger divine design, one that your soul not only understands, but embraces fully. This awakening is a call to listen more deeply, to trust more profoundly, and to allow that inner voice to lead you toward the fulfillment of your highest purpose. It confirms that the spiritual threshold you've crossed has opened the path to a life that is more aligned, more conscious, and vibrating at a higher frequency than ever before. The third sign appears when you begin to feel a profound sense of detachment from situations, people, or beliefs that once held you tightly. You no longer feel the urgent need to control or possess anything. Instead, you allow life to unfold naturally, trusting its rhythm and wisdom. Carl Jung noted that conscious detachment is a clear sign of spiritual maturity and the crossing of a vital threshold as it frees you from the burdens that once held back the soul's expansion. This sign reveals that you've started to live from a lighter, freer vibration, one that aligns deeply with your inner truth. The sensation of deep detachment is not abandonment. It is a conscious act of release that redefines how you relate to the world and to yourself. You no longer feel trapped by the compulsion to control every part of your life or to cling to people, ideas, or circumstances that no longer resonate with your essence. Instead, you let everything flow in its own time and space, trusting that the universe moves in your favor, even through uncertainty. This detachment is not indifference, but rather a mature, conscious form of love that recognizes the impermanence of all things. Carl Jung taught that by releasing attachment, we make room for genuine inner freedom. allowing energy to expand and consciousness to rise. This liberation is a powerful sign that you've crossed an irreversible spiritual threshold. Living from this space of detachment allows you to observe life with greater clarity and serenity, no longer trapped by intense emotions or rigid expectations. The lightness that comes from letting go connects you with a higher vibration, a frequency where the soul is free to dance in wholeness and joy. This new state also reshapes your relationships and life experiences. You begin to attract more authentic connections and circumstances that reflect your elevated frequency. The energy you emit is no longer tinted by fear or anxiety, but infused with deep trust in the natural flow of life. Thus, conscious detachment becomes a clear sign that you've crossed that spiritual threshold, a decisive step into a life more true, more free, and in harmony with your highest purpose. It becomes a sacred gift you give yourself, to walk into the future your soul longs for, with power and lightness. In the act of letting go, you discover the freedom that is born when you release the need for control and place your trust fully in life's unfolding, guided by a wisdom that knows no error. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It is a gradual journey where you learn to discern what truly deserves your energy and what must be left behind. Carl Jung reminds us that this conscious detachment is a sign of profound spiritual growth, an invitation to live with an open mind and a light heart. It's the ability to flow with natural cycles, understanding that every ending creates the space for a new beginning. Practicing this detachment, you become less reactive and more observant. Anxiety, fear, and frustration slowly give way to a calm inner presence that holds your spirit. This peace no longer depends on external conditions. It's rooted in an inner vibration that reflects your connection to your essential truth. This new state of freedom also impacts your surroundings, drawing in people and experiences that resonate with your renewed energy. The quality of your relationships improves, and your daily life takes on a deeper and more enriching meaning. In this way, conscious detachment not only transforms your inner world, but also redefines the reality you live in. In essence, crossing this threshold invites you to live with authenticity, presence, and trust, leaving behind the chains that once restricted your growth. It's the turning point toward a fulfilled life, where freedom and love weave together to support your spiritual path with strength and clarity. By releasing the need to control or cling, you make space for new energies, opportunities, and people to enter, those aligned with your most authentic self. This act is a powerful declaration of trust in divine flow, a recognition that everything arrives at the perfect time for your evolution. The transformation that comes with this detachment doesn't just affect your external world, it reshapes your relationship with yourself. You no longer judge yourself for what was or what you once thought you needed. Instead, you accept yourself fully in each phase of your journey, with compassion and wisdom. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of this acceptance in the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole. This new way of being, free from rigid attachments, allows you to live with deeper presence and mindful attention. Each moment becomes precious, experienced through authenticity and openness. The energy you radiate becomes magnetic and coherent, drawing toward you experiences that mirror your inner growth and nourish your ongoing evolution. The fourth sign appears when your perception of time and reality begins to shift in profound ways. You no longer see life as a straight line or a sequence of isolated events, but rather as a living tapestry where past, present, and future are intricately woven into an eternal now. This expansion of awareness is a clear indication that you've crossed an irreversible spiritual threshold. Carl Jung referred to this transformation as part of the luminous experience, where perception opens up to wider and more meaningful dimensions. It means your soul has begun to inhabit a deeper reality, full of symbols and invisible connections that once went unnoticed. This transformation in how you perceive time and reality is like waking up in a new universe where everything is interconnected, where each moment reflects infinity and every experience holds layered meaning. Time no longer feels like a limiting chain, but a dynamic flow in which past, present, and future are entangled in an eternal dance that sustains your very being. This expansion of consciousness allows you to see life from a broader, deeper perspective, where ordinary events reveal themselves as sacred symbols speaking directly to your soul. It's an awakening to the hidden magic in the everyday, to the presence of an invisible order that quietly guides and holds everything in place. Jung described this encounter with the luminous as a sacred presence that touches the depths of the psyche and existence. This new way of perceiving reality also transforms how you relate to time. You no longer feel the pressure of imposed deadlines or the urge to rush through processes that require their own sacred rhythm. Instead, you begin to align with the natural cycles of your soul, honoring the sacred time each phase of your life needs to fully unfold. This is a sign that you've crossed a threshold into a more conscious life, where every moment is lived with intention and full presence. Your soul starts to recognize the unseen threads that connect you with all that exists, and this awareness guides you toward a more integrated and harmonious existence. The intertwining of time and reality you now experience invites you to trust life's unfolding, to accept that every experience has a purpose and a rightful place in the sacred fabric of your path. Within this expanded awareness, you discover a deep freedom that transcends human limitations and connects you with the eternal essence of who you are. This expansion of consciousness that transforms your sense of time and reality isn't just a fleeting experience. It's a profound change that reshapes how you inhabit each moment. Now, every instant feels infused with meaning, as if the universe itself is speaking through signs and symbols only your soul can understand. This sensitivity to the invisible and the sacred links you with an ancient wisdom that surpasses the boundaries of logical thought. As you begin to perceive life as a living, interconnected tapestry, you start recognizing patterns and cycles that once escaped your notice. You understand that every challenge, encounter, and change is part of a greater design, a cosmic symphony where everything holds a place and a purpose. This understanding gives rise to an inner peace that doesn't depend on external conditions, but on a deep trust in the natural order of things. Jung taught that this experience of the luminous is essential for individuation because it allows the soul to open up to higher dimensions of meaning and being. In this expanded state, the human being can transcend fragmentation and find unity with the whole. Duality weakens here, and consciousness rises toward full integration. This shift also transforms your relationship with the ordinary. What once seemed mundane or insignificant now appears as a doorway to the transcendent. Daily life becomes a sacred ground for learning and growth, where every action and thought carries a real vibrational impact. Living in this space of sacred time and expanded reality allows you to flow with greater grace and wisdom, responding to life from a place of deep presence and authenticity. You've crossed a threshold that invites you to live not just with the mind, but with a heart and soul fully awake, embracing the wonder and mystery of existence in every moment. This new way of inhabiting time and reality generates a vibrational shift that can be felt in every cell of your being. You don't just perceive life more deeply, your entire presence becomes more authentic and powerful. Expanded consciousness frees you from the illusion of rigid control and invites you to dance with the natural flow of existence, in perfect harmony with the sacred rhythm of the universe. This elevated vibration draws experiences and people that resonate with your new frequency, creating a virtuous cycle of growth and expansion. In this state, intuition sharpens, synchronicities multiply, and your connection to inner wisdom deepens, nourishing your spiritual path with clarity and purpose. Carl Jung taught that crossing this threshold is essential for the full integration of the self, because only by recognizing and living in this expanded reality can we reach the wholeness and authenticity our soul longs for. Perceiving time as a living fabric opens the door to a life rich with meaning, where each moment becomes an opportunity to align with your deepest truth. This transformation also changes how you relate to your past and future. You stop being tied to limiting memories or expectations and learn to inhabit the present in its fullness. This expanded present becomes the sacred space where your soul can unfold completely, without distractions or resistance. Thus, crossing this threshold places you in a vibrational state where life is experienced as a sacred mystery, an eternal dance of light and shadow, inviting constant growth and awakening. In this new awareness, your soul finds the freedom to express itself in its full magnificence and beauty. And the fifth sign, though not the least important, is when you begin to notice a profound transformation in your sense of purpose and mission. You're no longer driven by the need to meet external expectations or conform to imposed rules. Instead, you align yourself with an inner calling that guides you toward your true essence. Carl Jung understood that crossing a spiritual threshold of no return means connecting with that inner voice that fuels the process of individuation and personal fulfillment. This sign reveals that you've entered a path of authenticity and a deep commitment to your spiritual evolution, where every step feels meaningful and truthful. That shift in your purpose arises from a deep connection with the core of your being, where external demands lose their grip and the true call of your soul becomes clear and unmistakable. You no longer act out of obligation to someone else's norms or to seek others' approval. You act to honor the genuine essence that drives you from within. This internal calling becomes a force that motivates you to live with coherence, integrity, and passion. Every choice and every action becomes a reflection of that sacred voice, leading you toward the fulfillment of your personal and spiritual mission. Carl Jung described this awakening as the process of individuation, where the human being becomes who they are truly meant to be, transcending conditioning and limitations. Once aligned with this purpose, you begin to feel a clarity and peace that once seemed unattainable. The path may come with challenges, but the inner certainty sustains each step, giving you the strength to move forward with confidence and resilience. This transformation not only benefits you, it radiates outward, inspiring and uplifting those around you. This sign is a powerful indication that you've crossed an irreversible spiritual threshold, a point where authenticity and devotion to your evolution become the driving force of your life. Living from this space is to embrace the truth of your soul and to walk with purpose toward conscious and complete fulfillment. You no longer seek external validation or let yourself be guided by social expectations. Instead, your focus turns inward, toward honoring that internal call that resonates with the very essence of who you are. This deep connection anchors you in an authentic frequency that energizes your every thought, word, and deed. This alignment with your spiritual mission gives you a sense of wholeness and direction that transcends everyday highs and lows. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the process through which the soul finds its path toward wholeness. And this awakening to purpose is the tangible manifestation of that inner journey. Each step you take from this place of authenticity is an act of conscious creation, a manifestation of your deepest truth. At this stage, decisions are no longer based on fear or uncertainty, but on the trust and clarity that emerge from your center. Life begins to feel more fluid and meaningful, and even if challenges arise, you are certain that each experience brings you closer to the full realization of your essence. This transformation also impacts those around you, creating a resonant effect that inspires others to seek and live from their own purpose. In this way, crossing that irreversible spiritual threshold not only redefines your personal destiny, it contributes to the collective awakening and the weaving of a higher consciousness. In the authenticity of this new purpose, you find the strength to live with integrity, passion, and love, honoring both the light and shadow within you, and walking with courage toward the destiny your soul has always chosen. You've journeyed with me through a deep path, crossing that irreversible spiritual threshold that transforms the very essence of your being. Recognizing these signs is to embrace your truth, to accept the strength that arises from integration, clarity, detachment, expansion, and true purpose. This awakening marks the beginning of a fulfilling life, where every step resonates with the vibration of your soul. Allow yourself to move forward with courage, knowing that you've crossed a point of no return that leads you toward realization and profound authenticity. Your inner light is invincible, and your path is unique and sacred. If this resonated with you, don't leave as if it were just another video. This channel isn't for those just looking for pretty words. It's for those who are ready to bury their weaker, conditioned, and domesticated selves and walk straight into transformation. Subscribe if you're one of those souls. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any messages that can shake you up, awaken you, and free you. And if you want to leave your mark, leave this quote in the comments. Silence is my armor. Consciousness is my sword. That way, I'll know you stayed until the end. That you're not just anyone. That you belong here.